the way, before I go any further, I should probably say I'm not making recommendations to anybody about how they should, you know, take care of their own mental health. Everybody's responsible for making their own decisions. And if you end up in the psych ward, well, don't blame me. Okay.
Okay, hello and welcome to the Bipolar Bear podcast. I'm your charismatic host, Kushal Salian, and with me today is a bipolar gentleman from San Francisco, Mr. Wayne. He's recently retired and he's a writer. He dabbles in science fiction and historical fiction, and he identifies as a lifelong spiritual seeker and a mystic. So, thanks for being here, Mr. Wayne.
It's a pleasure. I'm glad we got to meet at last, Kushal.
Likewise. Uh, so can you tell me your bipolar discovery, like how it emerged into your life?
It's an unusual story in that I originally diagnosed myself when I was first hospitalized, and that was when I was 24. And I was taken away by the police to a mental hospital. It was one of those that were more common in those days. There was a period when we had, the place that I was taken to up in Sonoma County was closed down later, along with a lot of other similar hospitals. And it was a bit like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It was one of those places where you would have all kinds of, people who are fairly disturbed in different ways. And I think there was probably a regularly circulating population. I was one of the people who was just sort of dropped in there to be diagnosed and then prescribed something and then let go as soon as I was stable. And the interesting thing was that it's hard to pin down a particular, inciting incident that got the manic phase going, because that's the thing that usually attracts attention. When people are depressed, maybe they will tell other people about it, and then seek help themselves because they're miserable. But when you're manic, you probably don't even realize there's anything really, that bad going on. In fact, I think it's really something that society observes. And other people think there's something the matter with you. And if they, and if the cops think that you're incapable of taking care of yourself or even understanding simple questions, they'll assume that, yeah, this person should be taken away.
Okay, so
And
for those
so,
who, sorry, for those who couldn't make out right now, this is obviously type 1 bipolar disorder, as opposed to the previous guest I had who was type 2. With type 1, we have,
yeah, I'm not sure what the distinction is.
no, you have symptoms of mania, psychosis, which is just symptoms of type 1. I mean, there could be
Mm-hmm.
depressive psychosis for type 2, like psychosis born out of depression, but otherwise,
Oh.
manic psychosis is just a feature of type 1.
Oh, okay. Well, I would say that on the whole, I haven't suffered very much from depression. I mean, I've had reasons to be depressed in various times in my life. Everybody does. And but that doesn't really stand out nearly as much as the manic phases, which have been many years apart. There are other people who suffer from it in a way that where it cycles more rapidly, and I'm one of the lucky ones, I guess, is that in that I've had relatively few episodes that have been spaced many, many years apart, and they might have been triggered for different reasons. I would say that there are a few things that I can identify pretty well. Of course, if you're under stress for a long period of time, that like the most recent episode was in 2020 during the pandemic. And like a lot of people, I was at home all the time. And in that case, I was alone, and I may have lost sleep. I don't know exactly if, we can't really talk about influences in a way that's absolutely consistent. However, I could say that if you do lose sleep or you don't eat or both for long enough, things will start getting weird. That's, I think that, as I would say that it's very important for people in general to eat and sleep regularly. I mean, that sounds like it's self-evident, but one can very easily get into a sort of a phase where staying up and just letting your imagination run wild seems like the perfect thing to do. And as a creative person, that's how I like to operate. If, when these, and the trick is, if you're a creative person, as in my case, I've been an artist, I've been a writer, screenwriter, actor in film and TV. Basically, that's how I live. And the trick is, and a lot of creative people happen to also be bipolar. At least there seems to. I'm not saying that there is a correlation, but it's been noticeable enough that you can, and it's not talked about very much, obviously, especially if somebody becomes well known for, they probably don't want to talk about it. I'm not well known at all yet.
So do
So
you like discussing psychosis? Like, what was the ongoing theme of your previous manic psychosis episodes? Like, did it feel like some sort of awakening of some sort? Because that's a
well,
common one.
yeah, well, I would say that because I've always been interested in alternative spirituality and mysticism and exploring the nature of reality, it's almost inevitable that I would be looking for revelatory experiences. And people can sometimes seek this out by psychedelic drugs, which I tried very long time ago. I'm really, compared to any, Timothy Leary or Terrence McKenna, I was a total lightweight. Okay, so I actually use my imagination much more. And it turns out that the human mind is quite capable of creating its own psychedelic experiences. And I would say that the problem comes in when you don't know how to discipline it. You don't know how to stop it, because it's kind of like having a superpower that you don't know how to control. And I've pretty much been working with that my whole life. I mean, I'm 62. I've had decades of experience dealing with these different states of mind and how I view them. I no longer look at this. I don't even use the term bipolar or psychiatric terms anymore. I just think that the whole paradigm is founded on a fundamental metaphysical error. And that is, there's actually a couple of metaphysical errors. One is that there is any self-existing objective reality. out there, and that you and I can be more or less in touch with it. The other error is that, well, psychiatry doesn't even know what consciousness is fundamentally. The assumption is a materialist assumption, is that the mind is something generated by electrochemical activity in the brain, that it's all happening in here somewhere. And then if somehow your behavior or your thought patterns don't seem to mesh with other people's consensus reality, which is an illusion, well, they think there's something wrong with you and you need to be adjusted, and you should, take some of this, and then you'll be like the normies again. I just reject that whole point of view entirely, as it's founded on error. My own take on consciousness, which I've been, again, it's one of consciousness and reality and physics, these all tie together. And I've been looking at this for years and years. I'm not an expert on physics or the multiverse theory, but I take it seriously enough as, things that can help us understand what's going on and why it is perhaps some of us experience things differently than others. People who are branded as bipolar or schizophrenic, they're clearly experiencing non-ordinary states of consciousness that society doesn't know what to do with, they don't value these states, and they're just, if anything, they're frightened of it, because people are naturally frightened of what they don't understand.
Would you say you're thankful for your condition?
Excuse me?
Would you say that you are thankful for your condition?
I would say that I have no desire to be like a normal person. I don't really have very much interest in fact, if we really look at society objectively, it's basically run by psychopaths for the benefit of psychopaths. And and that means we're all living in an open air trauma ward. I mean, if trauma is one of the factors that precipitates mental illness, well, voila, we have right there we realize, the problem isn't how we were born, something innate in us. I think that it is part of the conditions that we live under. And if you have suffered trauma, if you haven't suffered trauma yet, well, just wait a while. It's practically the price of admission to the human experience. You're going to have to deal with it sooner or later. And how you deal with it is going to determine, how it gets expressed in these peculiar states of mind. I would say that bipolar and schizophrenic people probably have been responding to their traumas, and it might be multi-generational trauma. In my case, I'm almost certain it is, because my parents went through a highly traumatic period of history, World War II. And, I may have inherited some of that. But we all have to figure out a response. And also, if we experience non-ordinary states that are not, we have to be able to objectively observe them and understand, what to do with them. Nowadays, my guideline for myself is, if I ever find myself having another, let's say, let's use the word manic. Let's say that I have a period of what other people might call delusional thinking, and seeing things or hearing voices, whatever it is. My first rule is, don't go out in public and share this with anybody, because that's how you get in trouble. It's kind of like being an outlaw. you have to have some basic street savvy, okay? Don't do stuff that's going to get you caught and taken away. If you can possibly manage it, stay home, take care of yourself by yourself if possible, so you don't have to go freaking anybody else out. It's hard to do if you are in a state where you think, well, anything goes, that whatever ideas lit into your mind are perfectly okay. You kind of, that's the part where you see, because judgment tends to be the first thing that goes out the window. So I don't have a perfect solution as far as how to keep out of trouble when that sort of thing starts happening. But it will pass. Ultimately, it does. I mean, you don't even one doesn't even really need medication. It's simply like, you know, a phase that will peak and then recede in just like the tides. It's just, you know, you just have to stay out of trouble until then, you know.
Let's discuss that phase though, the manic psychosis phase,
Mm-hmm.
because uh, we rarely get to. I mean, it's not every day that I find someone who can articulately explain their own observations like this. So, what's your thought on the quote by Joseph Campbell that the psychotic is drowning in the same waters in which the mystic swims with delight?
Oh, okay. That's a good quote. I wasn't expecting that, but thanks. Yeah, I would say that now, among the things that I studied over the years was Tibetan Buddhism, which is a deeply mystical path. It's a magical path. In fact, one of my teachers was what one might call a wizard. Okay, there's actually a whole lineage of people like this. They don't have like powers that you can see like Jedi, okay? But they do understand the nature of the mind, and they can be extremely helpful. Um, One of the things that has helped me in recent years, and I hope that this help continues, is that I made what I believe a contact with my own inner guru, and it's an ongoing thing. This happened for the first time approximately, let's see, it's 4 years ago, um, when after my mother passed away. In the middle of the night, I started having this, well, you might call it a dialogue, because it really was like having in the middle of the night, having a conversation in my head. And there was a voice that was just like mine. It was simply operating on a much higher level than I ever could in my best moments in my waking life. So I started taking notes and trying to learn as much as I could, because this part of this you know, entity or being or part of myself was clearly trying to instruct me, to clue me in ways that I had never imagined. Now, how did that happen? I think that may have been some preparatory work going on uh, that I had, which bore fruit in a way I had not anticipated. The Tibetan Buddhism might have helped, but the Tibetan Buddhism phase was years before. I had not even given it much thought, but I do believe that if you do have a spiritual teacher, the best thing that they can do is try to awaken that inner guru. The best teachers try to make themselves obsolete. And if you can find somebody like that, you're very lucky. I don't know if you've had any teachers or gurus of your own, Kushal.
Not in person, I mean, not in a two-way communication, but yeah, there may be in my own circles, like as I move on, as I grow up from one day to the next, one year to the next, people come and go within my circles who take the role of that guru. Uh, and just like the people I read about and follow research and basically just accept as someone who knows what they're talking about, they also take the role of that guru. But officially, there's not been any sort of guru disciple relationship with me.
Right. Yeah. Well, as I said, the ultimate um, the ultimate version of that is when you are your own guru, or you've internalized it to the point where you don't really have to look for answers outside of yourself. That's I cannot say how long it takes to get there because it took me you know decades of living on this planet before this became part of my reality.
Do you still
And
consider yourself a seeker?
well, the term seeker itself may be obsolete by now. I don't also, by the way, I don't have this ongoing dialogue that I used to back in 2018 because I believe it's more like, rather than having a visitor in the middle of the night, like, to have a chat with you, it's more internalized now, which means that it's more like the guru is just sort of like taking up residence, and I'm I personally am alternating between different levels of awareness all the time, and it's a remarkable thing, and hopefully it seems to be useful in terms of creative work, certainly, and my being able to get along with everyday life. I think a lot of people who are dealing with stuff like bipolar would just like to be able to get through everyday life and not be tormented by their inner states and not get hassled by the world. And that's, and goodness knows, you know, that's a perfectly legitimate goal. I don't think that it has to do very much. Thankfully, in my case, now that I don't have to have a day job, I don't have to go around pretending to be a normal person. That's liberating. I think that being able to basically get away from your unhealthy society is really one of the best things, if you can possibly, and I don't, it doesn't bother me being alone. It used to bother me. I used to need more human contact in the world, not so much now. Um, and it's remarkable how much of our experiences is generated within ourselves anyway. When we talk about the connection between reality and consciousness, well, I would basically say everything that we are experiencing, the way I experience myself as Wayne and everybody else experiences their lives. I look at it as if we are characters in a dream. And to use a loaded word, God is the one who is dreaming. All of us are like, parts of that universal consciousness experiencing itself, and everything around us. We are basically inside a dream in the mind of God at all times. That changes the whole notion of, the whole problem of human suffering, changes the whole notion of what is our life about. If we don't, certainly a huge amount of the problems of inner turmoil that people have is wondering, why are we here? Is there a purpose to this? If there isn't, well, then what are you supposed to do? I suspect a huge amount of, there's a lot of folks who appear to be functional out there. They're going about their lives, doing their jobs and all that, and they're on medication. Sometimes you can even smell it on them because the chemicals are literally seeping into their body odor. I don't know if you know what that's like, but once you notice it, you know it's there, that they're taking antidepressants or something. And you go, wow, this is an open air hospital, you know? And I'm just one of the inmates who has figured out that you can be a free range loon within this system if you're and hopefully find a way to make it all worthwhile.
Did we discuss that timeline shifting bit?
Well, you see, here we go with, again, how much of now one of the issues that can happen, that again, this is like what you believe is possible can sometimes be at variance, can diverge from the so-called consensus reality. I don't have any problem with the notion of miracles, for instance. Now, that doesn't mean that people should attempt to jump off the roof believing that they can fly, however, like Neo in the Matrix. But then again, miracles do happen. And in fact, the Catholic Church and the Tibetan Buddhists and Tibetan Buddhism recognize that people have flown, literally floating in the air. That's not, that is completely within their reality. It just happens that might as well be happening in an alternate universe, because ordinary folks just don't do that. Even if you would believe it, believing isn't enough to actually do it. So, by the way, before I go any further, I should probably say I'm not making recommendations to anybody about how they should, take care of their own mental health. Everybody's responsible for making their own decisions. And if you end up in the psych ward, well, don't blame me. Okay. I'm just, I'm one of the lucky ones. I have to say, I've been exceptionally lucky, or have had divine protection. I don't know, because things could have turned out so much worse from the decisions that I made in my life. I could be dead or in prison by now, but I'm not. So at least not in this timeline.
Is there any hope of a future episode right now? Or what?
You mean speaking with
You
me
as
on
an episode. What?
You mean you and I talking again?
No,
Oh, you're talking about a manic thing.
yeah.
There's always a chance. And here's the thing I just recognize, that freedom involves risk, the acceptance of risk. How you manage it, of course, people can do this with varying degrees of competence. Okay. I like to believe that after the experiences I've had, particularly the last time I was hospitalized in 2020, that I've gained a little bit more skill. It's kind of like, I'm not saying that one should approach it this way. Like I said, everybody has to figure it out on their own. But I opt to be, my choice is to be free as this world will allow. And so I don't take medication. I consider it actually impediment. The experiences I've had with medication, the strongest ones were the ones when I was first hospitalized when I was 24, because it included antipsychotic medication, which they gave everybody who was brought in there. I would say that, even the milder stuff, and Depakine or Depakote is relatively lightweight, but I still consider it having, I think it has a dulling effect on creativity. And I take the risk. I assume the risk personally. I'm not responsible for anybody else. That's the beauty of it. I'm single, I have no kids. I only have to take care of myself. So, and not everybody is in that position. If you have bigger responsibilities, then you have to weigh the risk differently. But there's always possible. I could always have some flight of fancy that, but it seems less likely now because I understand a few things. In particular, I understand that the effects of sleep deprivation and fasting. So I try to stay grounded, as in terms of what tends to keep me on within consensus reality. I think I recognize where the borderline is, where the edge of the envelope is. It's a bit like being one of the metaphors might be riding a motorcycle. If you've ever ridden a motorcycle, is just inherently unstable because you're on two wheels, and there is a limit to the traction, especially in the corners if you're on a twisty road. If you're skilled, you will understand what the limits are under different conditions. And you will try to stay within the envelope of within the limits of traction. And if you don't, well, you'll feel the tires start to slide. And depending upon the quality of your bike, you will either be able to recover from the slide or you won't. And if you don't, you'll crash. I've done that. I used to ride motorcycles. I know a lot about crashing. So, but I gradually got better at it. The longer I did it for about 20 years. I got better at it. I stopped crashing. It's probably a lot like that. But, a lot of people just don't want, after a certain point, they just don't want to take that kind of chance anymore. I totally understand. There's a lot of people who shouldn't ride motorcycles either.
So what would
It's just not worth it.
what would your advice be for bipolar folks in general? Like we have 2 minutes left, and this is the last question.
Well, I would say that it probably would, once you're not suffering from symptoms, meaning, you feel like your mind is relatively undistorted, start looking outside of the paradigm of Western psychiatry. There are other ways of looking at this whole phenomenon of these non-ordinary states that don't look like illness, okay? If you start inquiring in that direction, you might find a way out, which doesn't involve, you having to take pills for the rest of your life. Just a thought. Anyway, anything else?
No, that's it. Thanks a lot for taking the time and being on this little podcast.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, and I hope that this has been of some benefit. And so I send my blessings to all of you. Take care.